come in, it's because of the game, don't you have to win.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, big thank you to everybody that continues to comment on the videos. That's really appreciated. Certainly I don't think there'll be any comments about pronunciation this week. Yes. Okay. Doesn't bother me. I mean, all I can say is thankfully my ability to taste whiskey is considerably better than my pronunciation skills of foreign words. So, and at the end of the day, I think that's probably what's the most important about these episodes of the show. So I may mangle the occasional foreign word, or more than the occasional. Like I said, I don't think that's going to be happening today. Is it, Buddy Cat? Come on. So, today's episode of the show, every now and again I get samples, you know, I kind of collect samples, they kind of build up and they're odd samples, and I think, you know, I really would like to use them for an episode of the show, but they never seem to fit into a sort of an overriding theme, shall we say, and as you know I like to have at least a general theme for each episode of the show. So every now and again it's kind of nice to do just a general roundup of stuff, and today's episode of the show is obviously one of those episodes, and everything is relatively new. They've all been released, I believe. Yes, they have all been released this year. The Tomatin is brand spanking new and has only just come out, so that's the kind of well, not really the reason for doing this week's episode of the show, but like I said, it's kind of just rounding up a few bits and pieces that I thought might be fun just to share with you guys. And there's not really a great deal else to say, to be honest with you, so I may as well just kick off with today's lineup. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with the aforementioned Tomatin. This is the brand new limited edition 15-year-old, and you're probably wondering what's quite so special about it. Well, it was distilled in 2003 and spent the first 10 years of its life pleasantly maturing in American oak barrels before spending the next 5 years in ex-Moscatel casks. So, like I said, it's a limited edition bottling. It's about 6,000 bottles, and again, the nice thing about Tomatin, I think, is that their pricing. You know, they could have released it in a swanky box and all the usual faff and gubbins and all that kind of stuff, and charged you, you know, an arm and a leg for it. But no, in a box, plain box, 60 odd quid. About par for the course for a 15-year-old whiskey, to be bluntly honest with you. And so that's what we're going to kick off with. So I think that's going to be a really interesting bottling to start off with, and of course non-chill filtered, 46%, etc, etc. Then we're going to move on to two Balblairs. The first bottling is the 2000 second release. Time for the cat to exit. And this is a 17-year-old. It spent 13 years of its life in American oak before being finished for 4 years in ex-sherry casks. And pretty much like Tomatin, one of the things I love about Balblair is, and to be honest with you, sort of all of the Inverhouse distilleries, their use of sherry casks is subtle. And they're really well balanced whiskies. They're not big sherry monsters. I mean, yes, some of the very old expressions they release tend to have a lot more sherry in them, but even so, they still retain a lovely balance between the spirit character and or the American oak character with the sherry. And I'm hoping that this particular 17-year-old is going to be much the same. So again, non-chill filtered, 46%, as most of the quality distilleries tend to do these days. Third bottling we'll be looking at is the 1991. This is 27 years old. This is the third release, and and it spent 24 years of its life in ex-American oak and just the 3 years in sherry casks. So, but you know, quite a nice colour. They're obviously, I would imagine, first fill sherry butts that they use to get that kind of level of colour. And we shall see what the whisky itself is like. And moving on, the next two are two new bottlings in the Teeling range called the Brabazon, which I believe from the blurb is an experimentation on the effects of different casks on Irish whisky. Yeah, I know you'll love that marketing speak. So bottling number one, and these are not cheap, I hasten to add. Well, no, they aren't cheap, they're 70 odd quid. So bottling number one is a vatting of 6 sherry casks, 5% of which come from 2001 and 2002, with 30% being taken from 2005, 7 and 8, bottled at 49.5%. So a lot of sherry. Well, we shall see. I mean, you know, you should never judge a book by its cover, and that's one of the wonderful things about whisky. And I still get a frisson of excitement every time I get a new sample. You know, what's it going to be like? Especially if it's from a distillery that I really like, and also from distilleries that I might not have quite such a high opinion of, because you know, you're sort of going, is this the one bottling that suddenly sort of blows everything away and makes you sort of look at the distillery in a whole new light? Not that I'm saying that about the Teeling, I hasten to add, but you kind of get what I mean. So bottling number 2 in the Brabazon series, again at 49.5%, is well, not quite so much detailed information about the cask types, other than they include port finished and fully port matured of different types of port and what have you. So I'm guessing there's some tawny port casks and some regular port casks, I would imagine, in there. And do you know what? I would expect a much more of a sort of red hue to the whisky, considering the amount of port casks used, but it's not that dark, and I think from looking at it you wouldn't have necessarily guessed that that was a port finished stroke matured whatever kind of whisky. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see whether the port character is as light, shall we say, as it appears in the colour. And finally, the old Ballantruan 15. Now, as you probably remember, a few weeks ago, more than a few weeks ago now, I did an episode of the show on Tomintoul, and the old Ballantruan 15 was kind of the odd one out, I suppose. I mean, not because it was a poor whisky, otherwise, well, it might be a poor whisky, you never know. I might be highly critical of it, you never know. But I decided that I was going to use the new 15-year-old lightly peated bottling, whose name I completely forgotten. Peaty Tang, that's it. Rather than using the old Ballantruan. So I thought, right, okay, let's use the old Ballantruan today. Always like to finish with a little bit of peat, and it's a roundup. Yeah, let's chuck it in and see what happens. So right, there you go. That's today's episode of the show, or should we say that's the lineup for today's episode of the show. I'm not finished just yet. Big thank you to the distilleries, in-house distillers, Tomintoul, obviously, Angus Dundee, and Marussia Beverages, and Tomatin for today's samples. Really appreciate that, and appreciate your support. So time to kick off with the brand new one. Right, okay, so let's kick off with the 15-year-old Tomatin. Let's see what Neil's gives us on this end. That is a lovely nose. Obvious Moscatel, sort of dry, grapey kind of character. But it's wonderfully balancing it. In barley, I'm getting a little bit of vanilla, bit of edgy Highland mineral notes, touch of lime, sort of a little background note of roasted coffee as well. It feels like it's got some lovely weight to it, and I think that's one of the things about Moscatel. Tends to be sort of, you know, quite a good white wine cask for finishing, along with things like Sauternes. They have quite a lot of character, and they do add, you know, a little bit of sweetness. You know, certainly honeyed sweetness in the terms of in the case of Sauternes, and a sort of a grapey kind of sweetness in the case of Moscatel. And you don't see very much in the way of Moscatel casks being used, but you know, they do seem to be pretty successful, and this is a lovely nose. Getting quite fragrant now, sort of quite aromatic. Certainly the barley is getting quite fragrant, and yeah, that's a really appealing nose. Let's see what the palate's like. Bit sweeter, certainly up front on the palate. You certainly get quite a lot of the dried sort of grapey fruit, but the mid palate is really quite minerally, quite citric. I'm getting lime, lemon, and it sort of cleanses the palate quite nicely. It lets a little bit of sort of almost kind of coffee mockery sort of spice come through right on the aftertaste. Really juicy, full, malty as well. It's a lovely rounded whiskey, and it's certainly sort of really well balanced. So great starter, I think. Okay, so let's move on to the first of the two Balblairs. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite a lot of sherry, in actual fact. I mean, it just goes to show how 4 years, you know, can add quite a bit of sherry character. I would guess first fill sherry casks, because it's got quite a mature sort of armagnac-y, pruny, raisinated note, but that it's balanced wonderfully by that fragrant American oak. And I would imagine, again, probably first fill American oak, judging by the amount of vanillins and the amount of sort of bourbony sort of character. And this is one of these sort of lovely noses where you sort of keep getting sort of different notes each time you stick your nose in. You know, you pick up the sherry, you pick up the American oak, and you can pick up the character of the distillery as well. It's got a slightly fainter Highlandy character than you would say find in the 2005, the sort of 10-year-old, which is all American oak aged. But getting a little bit of dried tea leaf, possibly. But it's becoming really vibrant and minerally and intense. Did I say subtle minerality? Certainly isn't now, but that's just such a lovely balanced nose. It's not too much of one thing, it's all really harmonious. Right up my street, this particular one. Let's see what the palate's like. Oh, that's a luscious finish. Now that's how I like my use of sherry casks. Kicks off with the American oak, not so overtly vanillined, more sort of mature rye notes, certainly getting sort of that rye-like spiciness to start off with, and then this sort of the minerality, which kind of lasts right the way through to the finish, and the sherry notes kind of come through with that sort of quite pruny, slightly treacly kind of character, but again the balance is just absolutely spot on. The minerality and the citric notes really stop the sherry from becoming sort of too OTT. Little woody on the finish, but then that's the sherry cask kind of coming through. So it's got some. I think it's got some lovely structure. It's not too woody. Everything kind of like sort of lingers, if you see what I mean. So yes, it's got lovely progression, but the American oak just kind of lingers right the way through, right the way through to the finish, as the other sort of characteristics are kind of developing along the line. So yeah, damn, that's bloody good. And moving on to the 1991, let's see what the note gives us on this then, shall we? Oh, that's my tasting note done. Wonderfully tropical American oak led, cream, well no, yeah, sort of slightly toffee creamy kind of note, but more of that sawdusty old American oak character. Absolutely luscious, that mature tropical character comes through in spades. Gentle touch of dried fruit. Maybe not quite so minerally. The emphasis is certainly more on the American oak, but it's wonderfully rich, and oh my god, that is just layer upon layer of juicy goodness. I can sniff that all day. That is absolutely stunning. That is how to use sherry casks to finish, in my personal opinion. A little bit of spice as well. Touch of sort of oxidised apricot. It's just wonderfully balanced. Absolutely fantastic. Let's see what the nose gives us. That's a voluptuous palate, it has to be said. Silky, soft, still the emphasis more on the American oak. It's got that lovely sawdusty character. The sherry is a little bit more noticeable, but it's not overpowering. It's got that lovely sort of pruny, walnutty, raisinated fruit note. Nicely citric and minerally on the finish. Lovely palate cleansing character. Really granity aftertaste. I mean, it's got almost an austerity to that finish. But the malt itself is just so luscious and juicy. Not quite so tropical maybe as the nose. The fruit is more sort of mature apricot, maybe some apple. That kind of thing. It's less tropical, but still wonderfully juicy and really full. And I mean, yes, it's 120 odd quid. Wonderful old whiskies are expensive, but ooh, damn, that's good.
So tired, it's so clear, very angry.
Right, okay, so on to the Brabazon. Now, you're probably thinking, what the hell is going to follow that one up? Well, this was always going to be an issue when you lots of different styles, so I just thought probably best to go with the sort of the ABV, to be bluntly honest with you. So starting off with the 46, then the 49.5 and finish on the 50 just seemed the most sensible way. So you know, hopefully I've not been disingenuous to the Teeling, but so like I said, this is the Brabazon bottling number 1, and lots of sherry. And lots of sherry. Although I'll give it its due, it's reasonably well balanced. There's certainly some lovely Irishy soft, I mean, slightly toffeed notes. There's a little bit of almost kind of high-toned graininess as well. Obviously, there's no pot still used in this. It's certainly all single malt, but it has a sort of a slight high-toned character. The sherry is very, it's not gritty Oloroso-y sort of first fill. It's sort of slightly more softer, sweeter, rounder sherry, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's the balance is okay. I mean, it's a lovely fragrant nose. I'm just sort of kind of the sherry does seem to have sort of maybe blunted it a little bit, but only a little bit. But you know, I think the balance is pretty good. And yeah, it is pleasantly fragrant, aromatic. You can smell there's some mature spirit at work, or relatively mature spirit. I mean, what, 17 is the oldest spirit in here, and yeah, it's got. I think the balance is pretty good. It's okay. Let's just taste it, shall we? It's got a nice intensity to it, a pleasant citric, sort of slightly softly coffeed finish. There's it's not a sherry monster, but I feel the kind of like the sherry is a little bit, flattening is the wrong word, but it's kind of encroached a little too far. And although you can feel there's some lovely aromatic, soft barley and apricot and pear, it feels a little closed in. Yes, it's got a lovely spiciness. It has a minerality as well. Not quite the same level of minerality as, say, the Balblair, but it's got a nice freshness. I'm guessing that this is all ex-Cooley stock. And the quality is pretty damn good. 70 quid. I'm not quite totally convinced, it has to be said. I think it's a lovely whiskey, but not as lovely as some of the other. Certainly not as lovely as, say, the Tomatin. But it's okay. I mean, you know, if this is truly an experiment to see what happens with the vattings of certain sherry casks, well, yeah, it's interesting, and maybe I wouldn't have used quite so much sherry. Maybe I would have used, who knows, I mean, I'm not putting this kind of thing together, but like I said, it's not a sherry monster. It's not an Oloroso sherry monster in the sort of, you know, the traditional sense of the word, where you just get dried sherry fruit and that's it. I mean, there is a balance to it. So yeah, not too bad, I don't think. Right, okay, so let's move on to the port matured, finished, whatever. I mean, yeah, I suppose there is a bit of a gap in the market now for sort of port matured, finished, sort of whatever whiskies, Irish whiskies. I mean, certainly the Bushmills 3-wood has long since disappeared, and that was absolutely fabulous. And you sort of think, well, maybe that shouldn't have worked, but you know, it really did work well. So, you know, port, as long as you're a little bit careful with it, like sherry, I think it works quite nicely. Although this is pretty much, well, let's see what the nose gives us. It's not, again, it's not a port monster. There's porty, dried black fruit. There's a little bit of a banana skin. There's some spice. Yeah, it's pleasant. I'm just kind of with a little bit of sort of dark coffee. It's just kind of like, I'm thinking 70 quid, you know. And the thing is, with a lot of whiskies, it's not necessarily about whether they're good or whether they're bad. Sometimes it's just a question of like, what do I have to retail this for? Is it worth what that kind of money? And if somebody said to me, I've got 70 quid, what would you recommend? Is it a whiskey that I would recommend? And I'd say, yeah, you got to go for this one. This one's stunning, you know. And although it's not a bad whiskey, it's not the sort of whiskey that's it doesn't really excite me enough to want to go, yeah, damn, you've got to buy this, you know. It's getting quite herbally now, sort of a little bit of milled cereal, possibly. It's not really gristy. It's not that kind of powdery gristy. It's kind of milled, if you see what I mean, more rough milled, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. Like I said, it's not one that's kind of, you know, giving me orgasmic raptures, shall we say, but on the other hand, it's not sort of absolutely dreadful. It's somewhere in between the two. Anyway, let's see what the palate gives us. Quite malty, chocolatey, getting more kind of tawny dried fruits, that sort of dried, ready sort of curranty kind of fruits, bit of spice, not so much in the way of spirit character, a little bit of cinnamon, raisins on the finish. You know what, I mean, you know, that's kind of quite a nice Christmassy whiskey, I suppose, if you want something to kind of complement, you know, your Christmas cake, you know, and you don't want to go for a big sherried monster. It's got a nice relative lightness and a relative elegance, and yeah, it's interesting. It's just, for me, I don't think I would go, you know, I think there are other whiskies that I would feel that, you know, 70 quid, not this particular one. A number of you may well disagree with me, and like I said, it is not a bad whiskey at all. It's interesting, but at the end of the day, it's not the Balblair, you know. It's not, it doesn't get me that way. So so yeah, good, but and finally, a bit of peat. Always like to finish on a bit of peat, and well, this is the old Ballantruan 15. Let's see what the nose gives us. That is actually quite islery. It's got an almost medicinal note, and which is surprising considering the old Ballantruan uses, you know, mainland peated barley. But this really does have a kind of islery character, and I'm guessing it's just the level of peatiness more than anything, more than the composition of the peat, shall we say. Although you don't know. I mean, you know, you go to a commercial maltsters and you, like I said many times before, you just specify your parts per million and let them get on with it. I suppose some distilleries, organisations will basically say we want mainland peat or we want Isla peat. Sometimes they don't, I guess, and you kind of always get what you're given, I suppose. I must admit, I don't have first-hand working knowledge of maltings, but like I said, this has certainly got more than a smidge of Isla tinge to it, shall we say. Chocolatey, or lightly chocolatey, balanced, getting a little bit of spirit character, but obviously the majority of the emphasis is on the peat. Yeah, smoky, nice, big, peaty. Yeah, kind of ticks all those kind of boxes. Lovely intensity, bit of manure, you know, plenty of character. So pass on. that's got a lovely progression. I mean, it opens up with more of the fruit character and the creamy oak, and then the peat sort of starts to come through. Slightly dusty to start off with, a little bit kind of coal dusty, sooty, and then it really starts to ramp up towards the finish. Again, a little bit, but not quite so much of that medicinal notes. Quite tarry on the aftertaste, lingering peat. Absolutely lovely, but it's got a lovely sweetness to it. It has that sort of Tomintoul sort of, you know, full character. It's not sort of linear and one-dimensional and all about the peat. It has some lovely weight and depth to it, and I think that's really quite impressive. So, and yeah, it's got a bit of maturity. Difficult to kind of like see through all the peat, it has to be said, but it has a nice kind of softness. The alcohol is well integrated for 50%, and yeah, that's a nice whiskey. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Well, the Tomatin. Do Tomatin do anything wrong? Well, there's been the occasional slightly iffy bottling, but they are very, very few and far between, and I love the experimentation, but within, you know, their kind of set parameters, shall we say, and never sacrificing the balance. So really, really good. The Balblair 2000, yeah, that is a gorgeous whiskey. Again, sort of like, you know, maybe a little bit more sherry character, but I still think the balance is absolutely spot on, and really, really nice. The 1991, well, oh, that is a real treat. If you're looking to treat yourself, then you cannot go too far wrong with that. Still got some of the 1990 in stock, which was equally as good, but I tasted that and I thought, I just got to have some of that as well, you know. Absolutely fantastic. The Brabazon #1 bottling, yeah, I mean, not a bad whiskey. There, you know, it wasn't a big sherry monster. Yes, there was a lot of sherry character. Just left me a little bit cold, should we say, but not sort of like for the quality of the spirit in the casks, which was one thing I didn't mention. But yeah, absolutely no sulphur, no blemishes. You know, very, very clean. So hats off to them for that. #2, the pour, again, kind of left me with that same sort of feeling that #1 did. Yes, it's okay, it's pleasant, but. And there's always a but, isn't there? And the old Ballantruan 15. Yep, lovely, nice dollop of peat. But again, sort of not the whole sole focus. Got a nice richness, weight to it, and a nice fullness. So again, a really nice, really good whiskey. So like I said, once again, thank you to all of the distributors, distilleries for samples for this week's episode of the show. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and yeah, maybe, you know, you'll try out one or more of these particular bottlings. Maybe they're available in your local markets. If not, some of them we're stocking, and we do international shipping. Anyway, and until next time, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good gramming.